Help me figure out how to be the man and not the monster.
If you're not getting that, then you're doing something wrong.
It's not about who's right, it's about what is
Exactly.
right.
You have to improve your ability to communicate with each other.
Please allow your spouse to hold up the mirror.
Discipline is rooted in teaching, not in punishment.
Nobody likes to be controlled. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Extraordinary Family Life Podcast. We're your hosts, Greg and Rachel Denning. Today, we are going to talk about parenting from the same page, or at least the same book.
Yes.
We've got to do this together. We have to pull together, because if we're not, then in a very real way, we're pulling in opposite directions, or we're pulling against each other. And how ineffective is that? If as a goal, we're trying to raise our kids, but we're pulling in different directions, well, that's going to not work out very well.
Right. But we also want to talk about how we can parent from the same playbook, but we don't have to be the same people. We want to emphasize today the importance and the necessity of having a dad approach and a mom approach. Dad doesn't have to become mom, and mom doesn't have to become dad in order for you to be effective parents, but you do need to have the same underlying parenting style or approach, which we're going to talk through because there's 4 main different parenting approaches. And we're going to talk through those and explain which one's the best to have as your underlying approach, but that you can still parent in different ways. Like the way you apply it can be different because one is a dad and one is a mom, and that's a good thing. That's a positive thing.
The fundamental goal is that we complement each other in our strategies and tactics, not compete against each other.
Yes.
And I guess we can dive right into the complexity and difficulty of that, because I think like a man.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think, parenting should be done in this manly way. And I wouldn't even articulate it, but like, well, this is the way it should be done.
Mm-hmm.
And so you're going to approach it like a woman. And I'm going to think, why are you doing it like that? and vice versa, right? Mm-hmm. You think like a woman, like a mom, nurturing and caring and soft and gentle. And you look at me and like, you're a barbarian.
Exactly.
Don't you dare treat my children like that.
My thoughts?
Right? And I got to point this out for everybody listening. The reason we're also different and men and women is so we can help refine each other.
Mm-hmm.
So I could say to Rachel, leave me alone, woman, and let me be the man. And maybe I am doing it wrong. And she's seeing that.
Mm-hmm.
She's like, no, you're being too harsh.
Yeah.
You're being a barbarian, not a father.
Mm-hmm.
And you're acting from your anger. And she can even, she might even notice like, well, hey, I can tell you're upset because, well, I've known you for all these years and you're still upset about something that happened in the past and you're taking it out on the kids. That's not the point where I'm like, I'm the man here, leave me alone. That's not when I use this. It's like, oh, thank you, sweetheart, for pointing that out. I apologize. I'm going to go apologize to the kids. Help me figure out how to be the man and not the monster.
Right. So while we're talking through this and discussing the underlying parenting strategies and then the differences between how a father and a mother might approach it, we are also wanting to leave space in there for this place of refinement and improvement and growth. Like, yes, you might be approaching it as a mom or as a dad, but you still may be doing it, quote unquote, wrong because one sign you're doing it wrong is it just doesn't work. Like if you're not getting good results from it, and I think we all know on some level what good results are, it's good and happy feelings, it's good relationships, it's peace in the home. If you're not getting that, then you're doing something wrong.
Yep.
And so you need to improve and change and tweak, even if you still have a more feminine approach or more masculine approach. There's levels and ways to have that. There's obviously the toxic way, and it's not just toxic masculinity, there's toxic femininity too. Yep. And then there's the better, higher way. And so that's what we're after. We're after being true to ourselves, approaching our parenting from the feminine or the masculine, but at the best version of the feminine or masculine, not at the worst.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I guess the fundamental here is it's not about who's right.
Mm-hmm.
It's about what is right.
Exactly.
And so if the two of us together are saying, hey, we both see this very differently,
mm-hmm.
but we're not competing. It's not I'm right and you're wrong, or you're right and I'm wrong. It's like, what's the right way? What's the best way to
Mm-hmm.
get consistently get the results that we want.
Yeah.
And we keep iterating, we keep adjusting, we keep refining until we get the result.
Mm-hmm.
And you'll hear Rachel and I talk about this endlessly. It's math. It's an equation. Each kid is an equation.
Yeah.
And don't take it personal. It's like until you get the solution to the equation, keep working the equation. Just
Mm-hmm.
keep going and keep changing, keep
Tweaking
until you get it right. And if it's not consistently right, predictably right, then you're doing it wrong.
Yeah.
And it's okay. Sit with that. It doesn't make you a bad person.
Right. Just
So
because
you
you
just haven't
don't get
figured
the
it out.
math problem right doesn't mean you're a bad person. It just means you didn't do the math right, and that's okay.
Yep.
You just keep working at it until you get the math right.
Right.
Yeah. So,
Should we dive in? Oh, I want to hit something just right from the gates. And I think most parents struggle getting on the same page or around the same core philosophy because they haven't yet learned how to have uncomfortable, disagreeing conversation.
yeah.
I think that's the fundamental piece. And so while we're talking about parenting, this is individual work. And let's say, well, I would comfortably and confidently say that most adults grew up in an environment where they never learned how to do that.
Mm-hmm.
It was fighting, it was chaos, it was mayhem. They never learned how to sit and disagree. And that was true for me and true for you.
Mm-hmm.
But early in our marriage, we realized, okay, we got to figure this out. Like we can't
Yeah.
get upset and storm off and do the silent treatment. We can't slam doors. We can't yell and scream. Like that
Mm-mm.
resolves nothing. And so as uncomfortable as it was, you and I, we literally forced ourselves like, hey, we're going to keep talking through this
Mm-hmm.
until we understand each other. And it's all there.
Mm-hmm.
And it's so critical. You guys listening is so critical. You have to be able to disagree and stay calm and keep talking about it.
Even if you're passionate, you still need
Right.
to control your emotions. While we are going to be talking through parenting specifically, we do have to keep in mind this other aspect of it is one, you have to improve yourself as a person. Two, you have to improve your marriage and your ability to communicate with each other if you really want to make the most progress possible on this topic of parenting. But I do remember.
I want to emphasize that. So the more we work on us as
Yeah.
a couple, the better we are as parents.
Yeah. And that's part of like the whole equation that we're talking about. Like when I'm better and when you're better, then we get better results. And when our marriage is better, then we get better parenting results. Like it's all complementary and it all contributes to each other. It's holistic. So, but I do remember early on where, especially when you're newlyweds, we wanted to avoid conflict. We wanted to be happy all the time. Like, oh, things are great. We're happy. It's good. And so if there was a subject that was sensitive or brought up negative feelings, it was like, oh, let's avoid that. Let's not talk about that. But that doesn't solve any problems. That doesn't resolve the issue. And many people can go years without ever touching on the subjects because they want to avoid the discomfort.
It's the skeleton in the closet. And every time there's a new one, like, oh, let's just throw that in the closet. And oh, here's another child and here's another situation. Oh, let's keep avoiding that. And eventually you've got an attic and several closets so full of skeletons.
Yeah.
And
then you're wondering
nobody's functioning and the kids are terrible.
You're wondering why you can't function and like everybody's walking on eggshells and it's like, well, because we're all trying to avoid the skeletons in the closet.
Yeah.
So I remember leaning into this of saying, well, wow, as uncomfortable as this is and how naturally I want to avoid it, I learned to actually lean into that and to like go towards it when I noticed that there was something uncomfortable or that we were kind of avoiding. I'm like, okay, that actually is the thing. Let's talk about the thing. Let's have the conversation, right? Let's talk, babe. And
or you'd send me a message at work and say, hey, when you go home, we need to talk.
Exactly.
Like,
right.
No.
Right. But because we were both willing to engage in that process, it became very productive for us to grow and develop as a couple, as individuals, as a family, because we were willing to, and I would call them sometimes even breaking points. We were willing to break through that barrier by leaning into the discomfort so that we could move ahead. And it really is key. Like until we are willing to do that, we do get stuck. We're literally stuck. we are blocked, we're damned, like we cannot progress because we're not willing to move through that. Just like Marcus Aurelius said, the obstacle is the way. That thing that's standing in the way is the way to everything you want.
And I think probably the most common problem is that when couples disagree, they get reactive. And so they either implode or explode, or they get so upset. Now they do the silent treatment, they run off. They're so emotionally attached to it that it turns into a fight and a distance between them. They get cold. And so while it is challenging, we have to stay in it.
Yeah.
So if we were going to approach something that maybe Rachel's doing something with one of our children that I really don't like, and we need to talk about that. And so I bring it up, and then she gets defensive and reactive, and I feel passionate about it. So I start yelling, and the productivity of the conversation is already out the door. So we stay calm, and we're like, okay, we're both going to agree to stay calm here. We're just going to, here's what I like to teach my clients. Look, we're just going to set it on the table. That's all we're doing. You're going to set your perspective on the table. I'm going to set my perspective on the table, and we're just going to look at it. Like, we don't have to come to any conclusions right now. Nobody's being attacked. Just set the dadgum thing on the table.
Well, I think it's fascinating also, and I don't know why this works, but I think it does. If you learn to operate from the framework as though this was taking place in a business setting. And for so many people, that's easy to do. Oh, if I was at work, yeah, I would control myself.
You have to.
Wouldn't be yelling at my I would say
colleagues
boss,
or bosses or
I don't
whatever.
want you to pretend like your wife is your boss, right? I wouldn't be yelling at my colleagues. I would be controlling myself, and we would be having a conversation. Even if it got heated or passionate, we would still maintain a form of decorum.
You can't get out of the boardroom and slam the door and run off. You're done. You're fired.
Exactly, right?
And you can't scream and yell and insult them like, you're such an imbecile. You're an idiot. It's like, no, you have to maintain yourself. So if you can do it at work,
you can do it at home.
You can do it at home. Exactly.
Right. And so we have that framework. Now, we do have several podcast episodes about this already, so we'll link those in the show notes, because we need to talk about today's topic, which is the parenting. And, Greg and I have had many different little scenarios throughout our parenting years of raising 7 children. Well, actually, we're still raising them because our youngest is 8.
And our oldest is not yet 25.
Yeah.
So we're still in it.
Prefrontal cortex is still developing. And, we have disagreed on approaches and strategies, but ultimately we have been united in the parenting style that we use, which we're going to get to.
Even more so, I'd say we were united in desired outcomes and maybe core philosophies, because there's been plenty of times when style has been different. Yeah.
Well, and I'm using specifically the parenting style because that's what people call the 4 parenting styles we're going to adjust. Although that word can be misunderstood because the style or the way we implement it can also be different. But because I remember
that comes down to like an art and a science and a personality and a technique. So even inside of that, we're like, well, no, we're both using the same style, but the delivery could be very different.
Yeah. So I guess we should use parenting approach and then unique styles, masculine, feminine, and then the style will vary on each individual. So, there have been times when Greg has been disciplining a child, and I usually wait to say it till after, but I will say something like, well, I'm not sure. I think that was too harsh, or you said it, the tone was wrong, or this or that or the other. And we have been able to have those discussions of
basically the way it goes is I say, yes, dear.
No, you don't.
No, I'd say the majority
self-reflection. Includes self-reflection, that willingness to self-reflect, so that when I bring something up or you bring something up to me, we are able to reflect and say either, yeah, you're right, I should have been softer, or do you know what? No, I really felt like I handled it the way I needed to handle it in that moment.
And so if it's done well, like what you're talking about, you're like, hey, let's take a look at what happened. If it's done well, what it is you're holding up a mirror. Here's what it looked like. And I can look at that and say, yeah, okay, I totally see what you're saying. I was blinded in the moment, or you're right, I could have handled that better. And I would say most of the time when you offered a correction, I was like, yeah, I could have done that better. Thank you for pointing that out. and then I'd make adjustment. There's only been a few times where you came and your suggestion was so feminine that my response was, well, babe, our kids don't need two moms.
Yes.
And so I'm gonna in this instance, I'm gonna be the dad. I'm gonna do it the dad way, and you do it the mom way. And I'm not gonna ask you to be more manly and masculine and be tough. That's not your role. But there's a few instances like, nope, I'm gonna be the man here.
Right.
Now, I do not want to be misunderstood. It's like, well, I get to yell and I get to be harsh and mean because that's what men do. That's not what I'm talking about. Men are firm. Men hold boundaries.
Sometimes blunt, especially with your sons.
Men can be frank and need to be. And, to create that structure, and men can challenge. That's all. Those are all great things, but it has to be done tactfully and well.
And I think the important thing to understand in this conversation is that, one, we have space for that where we can say, you know what? These were my thoughts about how you handled that. Now, again, it's not happening in front of the kids. It's happening behind closed doors.
Even how you said that
private.
is so important.
Yeah.
So you make it private and you say, here's some thoughts about what happened, instead of you do this, or you suck, or you did that wrong, you're terrible.
Even though there have been times when I've come to you, say in passion, or I use the word passion because that means I have strong feelings about it, not like I'm raving lunatic type of passion. I come to you with strong feelings saying, I feel really strong about that. Like, I don't think that was right. And we can have the conversation. Then the point being that if you, in that process, say to me, you know what? No, I think I did handle it the right way. Then I respect that, because I know you are willing to correct yourself if I bring up a valid point. Again, because it's not about who's right, it's about what's right.
Exactly.
So when we both have that humility to be able to say, yeah, you're right. In fact, I know I was out of control, or I was out of line. So I know I was wrong. I'm going to go fix it. I'm going to go apologize. When that's happening, then we also have the space to say, do you know what? No, I handled it well this time. I did the right thing. And then we can respect each other and say, okay, if you think that was right, great. I'm going to respect that and allow you to do it that way.
Yeah. One of your spouse's primary roles is to watch you do family life and offer feedback. So please allow your spouse to hold up the mirror and share their perspective. It doesn't make them right. Rachel's not right every time. I'm not right every time, just because, well, hey, I watched that, babe. It doesn't make me right.
Right.
But we have to listen to each other. And when we do, we can all be better.
Yeah.
I think people get really defensive.
Yeah.
Especially if I blew up and I know it, I'm already mad at myself. And then you're coming like, hey, like, I see this a lot with coaching clients. Like you get, you just get defensive and sensitive about it. Drop that crap. Drop the ego.
Especially with your spouse behind closed doors. That's the best time to drop the defensiveness.
Yes, but I would say even in front of the kids.
Well, and that often happens after behind closed doors with the spouse, when you go out and you're like, okay, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I'm sorry. And you apologize.
I made a mistake.
But why can't, I guess I'm going to hold up an ideal here. If we model for our children in the moment how to intervene, how to humbly acknowledge what's going on, have self-awareness and situational awareness, how to take correction, how to apologize, and they see the whole thing. Because I think sometimes, to a fault, there's something's the kids do something, whatever, and it's handled wrong, and nobody says anything until they go afterwards in private and they talk through and they come back out,
and then it's never addressed.
Everybody saw that it was handled wrong. So what if we could repair it right there?
Yeah.
Like, that's awesome. Now, often, most of us pretty hot-headed, and so it doesn't work. But let's say, for example, Rachel is handling something wrong in the moment, and everyone can see it. It's happening. It's not like the kids don't know. It's happening. And so I walk over and I put a hand on her, or say, hey, sweetheart, take a breath. Hold on, let's walk through this. If in a moment like that, we as parents can be responsive and pause and take a breath and say, okay, hold on, let's look at this differently. That's amazing.
It is. But
we're handling in the moment and modeling for the kids how to do it.
I agree. And I do think that that's definitely an ideal to work for, because ultimately that's the point. We want to show our kids how to be able to do these things so that they then have the tools to do them with their siblings when they become adults. But I do want to say that if you're not there yet, okay, that's fine. Go behind closed doors
And start there.
and start there so that you can practice together, because for many it's hard just to do that as a couple. Practice, you get, because the other thing, and we're probably going to talk about it, is we also don't want to be modeling the wrong thing, because then that's what leads to, and for this is for a lot of families, the sibling rivalry and the fighting is happening because they're watching mom and dad do that.
Yep. They're being
And
critical
now
with each other.
they're imitating it and exaggerating it.
100%.
So
So
it's better to practice behind closed doors until you get better at it,
and not
so
be,
you can model the right thing.
not be critical. This is important. So we can talk about without being critical. Because thank you for bringing that up. That is so important. If we are critical to each other and we are critical to the kids, they will be incessantly critical of each other.
Exactly. Right.
Oh, it'll be so ugly and destructive.
So we have to practice until we get better at that, so we can model the appropriate thing.
Yeah.
Okay, so the first thing I want to emphasize,
one
though,
more quick thing. Many parents are afraid of if they say something, they're undermining their authority, right? And it's a sensitive thing and it's an important thing.
If the other parent says,
yeah. So if you say something to me, but I feel like you're undermining me, or vice versa, like I can see how you might consider that to be a valid concern. And depending on the dynamics, the kid might be like, ha ha ha, I don't have to do what dad says because mom disagrees, or vice versa, right?
Right.
And so you don't want that dynamic going on. But I think that's why we're having this episode today, is if they know you are united and that you're two different, very different people, but you're united in creating the same outcomes, they know they can't pick you apart, and they can't run to one for one thing and to the other. And like nobody feels like there's any undermining of authority. It's like, no, we're both trying to do the right thing. We're focused on what's right, not who's right.
Yeah.
And so it isn't undermining my authority. We're working towards the ideal solution.
Well, and it's also interesting that with that shared unity, which is actually what we're going to talk about, the unity, we do have the freedom to be able to say, well, wait a second, I see it this way. And even to say that in front of the kids, and it's not seen as belittling or undermining, because they know that really what we're doing is we're just having a conversation to consider all sides of it so that we make the best choice
right in front of
together.
them. Like, again, we're holding up ideals here. Rachel and I will disagree right in front of the kids.
Respectfully.
And say, okay, what about this? What about that angle?
We'll
and the kids are sitting there like, oh,
yeah.
What? And they're watching us go back and forth and see it from different angles and try to come to a conclusion, or even just like, well, we disagree on that. Like front row seats for the kids to watch that happen.
Right.
It's incredible.
But we did practice for many years doing that behind closed doors so that we got better at it, so we can do it in front of them. Because leading into now where I want to start here is that the reason we're having this conversation is because there needs to be unity in the underlying approach to parenting. Because otherwise, if you don't have that, kids feel insecure. They learn how to manipulate one parent or the other. They learn how to divide you and to like pit you against each other. Kids are smart, and they can learn how to work the system. And that, like, there's nothing wrong with that, because that's actually just human nature, survival. Like, it's just how humans work. And I think we all do that to some degree. So being on the same page, or having the same approach, doesn't mean that we have to approach or have the same style in the way that we implement the approach. So we need to understand these differences here. We can have the same approach, and that's the words we're choosing to use. Have the same approach, and the style of implementation is going to be different for mom and dad, right? But ultimately that the unity, that's what provides the stability. That's what provides the shared framework. That's what provides the structure that gives the kids that certainty that they need so much in order to really thrive.
Yeah.
So
they get safety, they get assurance, they get this sense of like, okay, there are boundaries here, there's standards,
It's clear.
there's a unity. Like I know what's expected of me, and they want that. They
Yeah.
want to feel that they're in a place that there's some clear structure.
Right. But then within that clear structure, there's going to be the variety that's also necessary. Because that's one of the things that's fascinating about humans. And that's also why I love the yin and yang symbol, which I talk about all the time, is that we need this mixture of one, feminine and masculine, structure and chaos. Like there has to be this balance, or else if you have all structure and no chaos, that's damaging. That's traumatic, even sometimes. But if you have all chaos and no structure, that's also traumatic and damaging. So you can't have just all one or the other. There has to be this balance there. So within, well, go ahead.
I just one of the guys in my in the Formidable Family Man tribe. They love to do Saturday projects, right? Where the whole family's working on things. They have some land and they're up in Canada and they got things to do. And, and like, well, we're going to learn how to work as a family. We're going to do projects as a family. And he said, you know what? The kids were like, let's do something fun. He's like, okay. And so they dropped all the chores and projects they were going to do. And they drove, an hour over to a bigger town where they had this huge indoor water park and just magic and memories and
Absolutely.
awesome. And so, the core philosophy of we're going to learn how to work and we get things done, but complement that with life is fun. Have fun, have memories, do great things and have that balancing. And it makes for really happy, healthy families.
Yeah. In fact, I think that it's often those contrasting experiences that are the most beneficial for the development of children and families. And in our own life, we've experienced that again and again because we've lived a travel lifestyle, but we've also learned that if it's all sitting on the beach all day long and just doing nothing, that is not good.
It's out of
Like
balance.
that's fun once in a while, but if you do that all the time, it's out of balance and it becomes demoralizing and like depressing in a way. So you have to balance doing the work and then just having the fun, especially some spontaneous fun like that. So yeah, within this framework of we have a shared approach, it's great to have the yin and yang, the masculine, the feminine, and the different ways that moms and dads parent and especially interact with children, because we do interact with them differently, and that's a good thing because it's helping to develop their brain, left and right hemispheres. Dads are roughhousing, they're playing, they're tickling, they're challenging them, they're pushing boundaries. That is important, that's critical for their development. But then it's great for mom to be there and she's soothing and she's, when the wrestling gets a little too rough, she's comforting and but if mom's there telling them
it's
to
gonna
stop,
happen.
well, it is gonna happen.
So you're gonna roughhouse and someone's gonna get hurt.
Right.
And mom can be there to pick it up, not prevent it. She's like, don't you dare roughhouse. This is my house. This is my sanctuary. No roughness, no risk. That's too far.
That is too much.
Yeah.
So mom's role in that situation is to be there to kind of pick up the pieces and kiss the boo-boos, but not to stop it from happening because then it's like we're talking about, it comes out of balance and that's not healthy. So then now the main question we need to get to
emphasize
talk about.
And this is a big difference that we see all the time. Men need to lead their kids into risk. So to do risky things safely. And as uncomfortable it is for women and moms, they need to allow that to happen, but also voice their things like, hey, let's not be too risky.
Yeah,
and
watch out for this.
Beware of those things. Like, that we're there to balance each other.
Right.
But that's one that comes up all the time. And for whatever reason, our society in general is at a stage of safety at all costs right now.
Right.
And it's not healthy. It's not healthy for people because they become so risk averse in everything. And they're so afraid of everything that the kid needs to wear cushions around him and only only exist in circular padded rooms because we don't ever want anything to happen to the child. And that's not healthy. It's way out of balance.
Yes. And part of the challenge, I think, with parents not being on the quote unquote same page is that they're not understanding the differences and the necessary differences in their roles. And so moms are wanting dads to be more like moms, or the dad is wanting mom to be more like the dad. not recognizing or realizing that we each have a very important role and we need to respect each other's roles.
Yep.
And realize that it's a role that's necessary and important and critical for the mental, emotional, physical development of your child.
Yes.
Literally. So that's the key. But we do, as different parents, masculine and feminine parents, we need to align on a philosophy. We need to align on approach. So now here's where I want to talk through. There's 4 different main parenting philosophies or approaches. And I want to go through them really quickly so that we can understand them. And of course, I'm going to tell you there is one approach that is actually better than the others. And it's backed up by research. Like, it is the gold standard of parenting approaches. So it's the parenting approach we all need to be
It
using.
makes sense too.
Yeah.
As you'll see,
The one that works the best with children.
when you talk through it, you're like, okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Like that's, I think as parents, that's how we want to be.
Exactly. So I'm going to read them first, and then I'm actually going to expound more on them after. The first one is authoritarian, which is strict and fear-based.
Leadership.
Or totalitarian. But I would also say for many people, they just think that this is parenting. It's being the authority, which there's truth to that, but it's the authority of, like, because I said so, because I'm the boss, because I'm in charge,
that's the word
because
I was
I pay the bills.
I'm the boss.
Yeah.
So I don't know any parents to be like, I'm the dictator.
Right. No one would say that, but they behave like dictators.
I'm the boss. Exactly. So you're the boss dictator. And if you call it a dictator or a tyrant, you'd be, no, I don't want to, that's terrible. That makes me feel bad. I don't want to be that kind of person. This is what's happening. So you're the boss and you're very bossy.
Yeah.
You get reactions. This is where you're using fear, your threat. I know. I'm getting into it because it's so good.
Second, permissive, which is lenient and inconsistent. Third is neglectful. You're literally disengaged or even abusing. Abusive could be involved in that, but you're neglectful or you're absent, right? Either
physically or just mentally.
Yeah, exactly. And then the last one is authoritative. So as authoritative, you have lots of love. You also have very high expectations. And you have, that's why I'm using the word authority again. You do have authority, but it's authority based on love
and
as opposed to, yeah, exactly. Okay.
So I guess people confuse often authoritarian and authoritative.
Exactly.
So let's go with authoritative is you have authority that you earn. You have real influence from respect and love and results. Like your children look at you and think, wow, I want to be like that. Tarian is, you just make that connection. It's bossy.
I'm bigger, I'm stronger.
It's my way or the highway.
Yeah.
I make the rules, and you'll do what I say or else.
Right.
You're literally a tyrant, dictator, monster in your own home, even if you are a nice, good person and you just want the good things for your kids.
Right. Yeah, you can be an authoritarian out of good motives, but that doesn't change the fact that it doesn't work.
Right.
And so, in case you haven't guessed, obviously it's authoritative parenting style that is backed by research to be the best parenting style or approach that is out there. So let's talk a little bit more about each, though, so that we can understand why they don't work, what it actually looks like in real life, stuff like that.
I would say in general, dads are going to lean towards authoritarian, being the boss, and moms are going to lean towards permissiveness. And so it's the competition between gentle parenting and harsh parenting, either of which work.
Right.
They just don't work. One of them raises weaklings and babies who think the world owes them something, and they just want safety at all costs, and they want to be pampered and taken care of. They're very entitled. On the authoritarian side,
entitled or incapable in many ways.
Yes, very incompetent, very underdeveloped. Yeah. They're just little babies. They're grown babies. On the bossy side, the dictatorship, your words
there's
come in.
There's more competence there and
even some more results, but it's buried in resentment and pain and very fixed mindsets.
Fear, for sure.
Yeah, massive amounts of fear. The internal dialogue, the inner voice is shame. It's
guilt,
mean. It's harsh. So you're just racked with torment.
Mm-hmm.
Like, okay, so you got stuff done. You forced yourself through it, but you're not enjoying life. Most of the people who grew up in environments like that, they don't like themselves,
Mm-hmm.
and they end up,
Not
passing that.
well-adjusted.
Yeah, they're passing that along. They're not. Yeah, you're right. It's just a lot of internal conflict
Mm-hmm.
there, and nobody likes to be controlled.
Right.
And so an authoritarian is the boss, the dictator. It's controlling, and no person wants to be controlled.
They don't. And so with the authoritarian style, it's high control and low warmth. It's almost, because I feel that,
I would say low respect too.
well, right, low respect for the child.
Yep.
And then of course that's not reciprocated. They have low the child has low respect for the parent because of that. But I think the warmth aspect is important because there's not a lot of that soft, warm feelings, because in order to be an authoritarian, you almost have to keep the cold demeanor, because otherwise, if you don't, it's like you feel you're going to be taken advantage of.
Which you will be.
That you're going to be, the rules are going to be pushed. The boundaries are going to be pushed.
They will. Yeah. For sure, because you haven't earned. I guess another way to see this, we're trying to give you all the different angles. You're not a leader. You're a boss.
Yeah.
And people don't respect their bosses. And leaders are leaders because people want to follow them. That's true leadership.
Mm-hmm.
Where as soon as the boss turns his back, we're going to do the opposite.
Yeah.
And so the boss is like, I have to keep being harsh because they'll take advantage of me, or they'll rebel, or they'll be soft and weak and spoiled. I'm not going to let my kids be spoiled little brats. And so I'm going to have to be the boss.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the vast majority of people operate between those first two, the dictatorship or the passivity. They're just oscillating, and they don't know there's other options. It's like, I'm not just let them do whatever they want. How do I get them to do it? I have to force them to do it.
Right. So they're very strict. They're demanding obedience from their children, which, we could do a whole podcast episode about how obedient children is not a good thing.
Right.
It's not good for your kids to be obedient. And they rarely
we can't just leave that hanging.
Well, okay, you're right.
We've done episodes on it because we're like, wait, what? I thought obedience was the goal. The real goal, the ultimate
ideal,
like the best outcome is that your children on their own learn how to make good decisions, and then make good decisions. They do the right thing for the right reason on their own.
Whether or not you're there or not.
Right. There may be no authority figure around. You might not be there. Nobody's there to tell them what to do. They think through it. They make the right decision, and they hold themselves to a standard. That's the goal.
Right.
And that is the opposite, not the opposite, but it's very different from just merely being obedient.
Well, in fact, you can't get to that outcome if obedience is the main goal. Right. If you're told to obey no matter what, without questioning, without debate, then you're not learning to think, you're just learning to follow orders. And that does not produce that outcome you just described.
Right.
But part of authoritarian parenting is that they don't explain why the rules exist. They don't explain the reasoning, which is part of this whole obedience thing. They're not explaining why I want you to keep the rule. You're not explaining why you need to do this thing. It's just because I said so. Yeah. You're supposed to obey me. And that is not healthy. If you want to raise well-adjusted kids, that does not work.
It will not work, especially because the kids will be grossly underdeveloped.
Right.
And often the parents don't explain it because they can't.
Their decision-making, their thinking is underdeveloped.
Yep. Yeah. And that's being inherited from the parents who haven't thought through it, can't articulate it. So they're like, well, just do what I say. And the kid says, well, why? Because I said so. That's why. You're like, well, I would love to be there in that moment and be like, well, hold up, parent. Why?
Yeah.
See if you can articulate this.
Right.
Why 8:30 bedtimes? Please back this up. What is it about those three numbers, 830, that is the magic formula?
Yeah.
For parenting.
Exactly.
It's an arbitrary number out of your
number.
dark cavity somewhere. Come on, this is ridiculous.
I remember when my kids were young, because again, we started off questioning a lot of things, questioning the norms and the conventions. And I remember telling my kids, like, get off the table, stay off the table. You shouldn't be off the table, on the table, even though kids, of course, love
Love it.
to climb on the table.
Yeah.
And I remember them asking me why, and of course, we were in this beginning this phase of like explaining to them and helping them to understand. And I remember thinking, well, why? Why can't they get on the table? And so I had to think through it. And then I actually came to a conclusion that, at least in my mind, worked for me of like, well, I guess there's not a great reason except for during certain times when we are, let's say, eating. That's when I don't want you on the table. If we've got food on the table and we're going to eat, I don't want you on the table because we're trying to eat and I don't want your feet. I don't want this. That's what I mean by don't get on the table. But if the table's clear and we're not eating, great. I guess
And you want to climb up there
you
and
want to
jump
climb on
off
it?
it and build a
Okay,
cool fort and
great.
fantastic. Be a
You can
kid.
be on the table.
Yeah.
And so, but the powerful thing of that too is that it helps kids to learn that life is more than just black and white.
Right.
It's more than just never get on the table because it's one or the other. They realize there's complexity and nuance and there's different situations where you have different rules, and that's okay. That's actually a good thing, and that's a more mature way of viewing the world because it helps you to understand that those situations apply lots of different places.
100%. There's an exception to almost every rule.
Right. It's true. And so you actually want to teach your kids that there are exceptions to the rules.
Maybe the best example of that is in the Bible. The Bible is just a book of contradictions.
Exactly.
And as you read through that, like, okay, no, this is powerful. It's important.
Right.
Like there are exceptions. So then as mom and dad, as we're parenting, like let's teach our kids how to think.
Yeah. And to understand that there are exceptions sometimes, and here's why. And here's why it would be an exception. And so we have to learn how to think about when are the exceptions and when do we follow the rules.
And that's true authority.
Right.
On the best form of parenting, true authority is when I've thought through something and I can explain it to a child at their level so they get it and they can repeat it back to me and they can agree. It's like, yeah, I see what
That
you're
makes
saying and that makes sense to me. And so I'm no longer going to fight you on that thing. We don't have to have a battle because I'm in.
That's the real power there, because when you can explain something to your child well enough that they get it and they then choose to opt in and keep the rule because it makes sense to them, that's where you have real power. That's the power of authoritative parenting.
Yep. There's no more battle.
As opposed to with authoritarian parenting, where you focus on punishing them if they don't keep the rules, or threatening them to keep the rules, or bribing them to keep the rules. That doesn't work because it's all externally motivated instead of internally motivated.
Yep. Well, and you just brought up something really important. Under the authoritative or the bossy, the dictator, there's lots and lots and lots of rules. Too
Right.
many rules.
So many
It's
rules.
rules for everything.
Yeah.
Your unwritten rule book for your family is massive.
Mm-hmm.
And guess what? Human beings hate rules. They absolutely hate rules. And so,
And they intuitively know that there are exceptions to the rules.
right. There have
Kids know that
Yeah.
even if they can't articulate it to you. They understand that somehow.
So in our family, as we were going through this, thought like, why have so many rules? Why all the rules? It's not helpful. Let's have standards.
Mm-hmm.
Let's have boundaries. Let's operate by principles, and let's talk through it as a family. Let's decide, how do we want to do life together? What's the better way? And then everyone agrees, like, oh yeah, well this is the better way. Let's do that.
Mm-hmm.
And we don't have to have a rule.
Right.
We don't have to have 10 rules around that dumb thing. It sounds like a government. Gosh. Like one of the worst things you can do is run your family like a government. This is the most inefficient, ineffective thing on the flipping planet. And everybody hates it because they just have 10,000 rules for everything.
Right.
So that's the authoritative side.
Well, and
authoritarian. That's
Right.
authoritarian.
And so when we get to authoritative, I want to dive into that a little bit more so people can understand the difference between a boundary or standard and a rule, because I'm sure there's some confusion there. But I also want to go through this some more. So, of course, in authoritarian, because we touched on it, like the emotional connection is limited because we're not focused on connecting with our child as much as we are on controlling our child.
Yep.
We want them to obey the rules and follow the rules because we think that that's how you create
I'm here to tell
great
them what to
kids.
do.
Right. And so kids often can appear well behaved or like good kids, but they are going to struggle with self-esteem. They're going to struggle with shame, guilt, like we mentioned. They're operating out of fear-based motivation. And of course, later they often rebel. In fact, if they don't rebel while they're living in your home, they're probably going to rebel, at least turn away from many of your standards when they get older because they just thought, I hated it the whole time. So you can have obedient and anxious children, but they're going to be resentful as
Yeah,
well.
the relationship almost always suffers tremendously under this
And
parenting approach.
And because we work with a lot of parents, I mean, we see this all the time. Parents who use the authoritarian approach, they have children who resent them, who rebel, who even sometimes hate them because they have been so heavy-handed.
Yep.
Okay, the second one, though, permissive. And this could be summarized as something like, well, I just want them to be happy. So I'm going to let them do what they want so they can be happy. It's low control. There's lots of warmth. This is kind of the gentle parenting of like, oh, I'm just here
I'm
to
going to let
help.
my kids choose because they know best.
Let them decide. We literally just heard this again recently. I'm just going to let my kids decide what's best for them. And
Anyone who says that literally has no earthly idea about child development.
right. Or
And what's
child psychology.
Yeah, like you have no idea what's happening in your
And what
child's
kids
brain and what they're
need.
capable of.
They need clear structure and boundaries because otherwise it feels unsafe. It feels frightening. It's the whole idea. People don't realize that this is actually a thing. And I'm going to use this kind of a silly story, but I remember because we created a life that allowed us to live and work from anywhere because we worked online. I remember during one time in our life when we were trying to decide what to do, and I felt so overwhelmed because there were no constraints on how to decide. Like we weren't going to move. We were looking at the entire globe trying to decide where should we live and what should we do. And I remember thinking like, this is overwhelming. Like, how do I decide if I move to Thailand or Argentina or, and people probably think, well, that's so silly. But it was this idea of all constraints being removed. I'm not moving there for a job. I'm not moving there because there's family. There were no reasons to move anywhere or not move anywhere.
Just whether we wanted
So
to or
when
not.
you have no clear constraints like that, it's actually overwhelming. And so I'm using this with this idea of child psychology. If you literally remove all boundaries from your child, it's not freeing, it's terrifying.
Right.
That's how they feel with no boundaries. They need to have clear standards, clear expectations, clear boundaries, so they feel safe. That's what they need. But with permissive parents, they're indulgent, they avoid conflict. And so they will just let them do whatever as opposed to conflict with them in order to hold those boundaries.
And I think it's important right there to point out that kids will test boundaries. They have to.
That's their job.
They're going to go, you're going to say, hey, don't do that. They're going to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And you think, you're just rotten, evil little monster. It's like, no, that's just part of being alive. You're going to test boundaries because they want to know, is it really a boundary? And so.
Or with the permissive style, if you think, oh, well, it must just mean that that's what they need. They need to live beyond those boundaries. So I'm not going to enforce the rules.
And be on their screens all the time.
They're pushing the boundaries because they need to know where the boundary is. They need to feel that security and that safety of like, oh, okay, here's the fence. Kind of like when you have cows, right? They're pushing to see where's the fence. Okay, now when I know where the fence is, now I can operate comfortably, safely, securely because I know what the limits are.
Exactly.
But if they don't have those boundaries, there's also no accountability. They can't develop accountability. They can't develop responsibility because there's no boundaries. Like it's literally impossible to do that if you don't have boundaries and expectations in place. So they can feel loved from you still, but they're going to feel anxious. They're going to feel insecure. They're going to feel kind of like I was telling with my little story. They're going to feel like, how do I manage my world because it's too big. It's too large for me to grasp and to try to make clear decisions in, right? So, and then they also, of course, struggle with authority figures, but I think they also struggle with their own individual authority. They're going to be lacking in that confidence of like, yes, I'm going to be certain and clear and
proactive and active. And
exactly.
So they're not going to be very productive or effective or self-directed.
Exactly. So the result of this approach is that kids often have poor impulse control. They cannot control their emotions. They can't control their desires or wants. They're entitled, they're spoiled, and they struggle with not only following structure in society in general, but in maintaining their own structure.
Yep.
So, and that's going to lead to like mental illness.
Yes, holding their own standards and setting goals and targets and achieving them, and setting up habits and routines and setting boundaries for themselves. So like, no, I'm not going to eat that stuff, and I'm not going to stay up all night playing games.
Yeah.
Like,
Because there's like, there's no point
Yeah.
in not doing that. Like, why should I have any rules or expectations at all?
And we see this often with both parents. Moms or dads can be very permissive for whatever reason. Maybe something the way they're
Sometimes
grown
I
up.
think it's in response to the more authoritarian parent, they're being more permissive.
Permissive, exactly. So it's a
Trying to
reaction.
balance that out.
Exactly.
But
So if
again,
mama's very, I'm the boss, the dad will become quite permissive and passive.
right.
And vice versa.
But that does not produce well-adjusted outcomes.
Right.
Okay. Neglectful this is more like, I'm just too busy. I'm just too busy to parent you. Whether it could be intentional, unintentional, life is chaotic. You're dealing with your own issues. And so you just don't have time for your kids. There's low control, low warmth.
And you hear this, you immediately think, oh, those must be the bad people. They must be bad parents that are negligent. Like, how terrible. Who would do that? But the reality is that's happening so much today.
Yeah.
Because of distraction and chaos.
Devices, screen time.
Overloaded lives.
Yeah.
So we have so many screens. We have so many activities. And in an effort to be a good parent, we have our kids enrolled in everything.
Right.
And we get them the latest and greatest of devices and stuff and things.
And as the mom, we're driving them everywhere, taking them here or there. And so unintentionally, we've become a neglectful parent because we're just so busy, so overwhelmed, so unavailable for them. There's no time for us to sit and talk to our child because we've got to go here now, we've got to go there and there.
Exactly.
And so it's almost
so we're not with them.
Yeah,
it seems like
definitely not mentally and emotionally.
Right, you're the taxi driver.
Physically be with them, but you're not there mentally and emotionally because you're worrying and thinking about this. Could just be caused from worry.
Yep.
You're stressed and worried about everything else, and so you're emotionally unavailable because you just can't. You can't handle
100%.
Yeah.
Or you're dealing with neighborhood drama or church drama.
Or family drama.
Yeah, extended family drama. So you actually become a negligent parent because you're so worried about something happening with your in-laws or your siblings or whatever. You know, and you're at the PTA or this organization or your choir and your sports.
Helping everyone else, but not your children because they're too busy for that. And I think this is so important.
Drop the hammer on this one.
Because it does. When you think about neglectful parenting, you do tend to think of some abusive person or some person who never wanted to have kids. But it's not that. It's often good intentioned parents who are good people, but literally just are mentally, emotionally checked out because they're so worried and busy with so many other things.
Yep. So the mental load's too big. Yeah. Dads do this a ton by pursuing business. We see this all the time with business owners, entrepreneurs,
so in
or
that
businessmen.
Way, a dad becomes a neglectful parent
100%.
because he's just not there.
He's trying to climb the ladder and he's doing it, quote, for his family. And he really wants to be financially successful. So he's chasing it down. And I see this all the time. They're making good money, but they're neglectful parents.
Right.
He's just not there. It's not enough quantity time. And he'll even bring work home. And even if he's trying with them, he's thinking about the next business deal or the negotiation or what went wrong. He's worried about his partners and his employees. He's worried about his team and his patients. He's all, and so it's like he becomes a neglectful parent trying to be a really good provider.
And I think it's important to point out that we can, as parents, be a combination of these as well, depending on the situation. So we could be this neglectful parent, and then when we are with our kids, then we're authoritarian or permissive.
I did want to point that out and really emphasize that. Hopefully, as you're listening, you're like, "Oh, yeah, I've done
it's not just
I've
black
been the
and
boss
white, one or the other,
and the dictator, and I've been permissive, and I've been neglectful."
And
you're like,
probably at
wow,
times been authoritative.
I've done all three today,
Right.
every day. And it might be in certain aspects. I've seen this too. It's like, wait,
Depending on the thing.
with food, you're very a dictator.
Uh-huh.
And with screens, you're permissive.
Right.
And with, quality time together listening, you're totally neglectful.
Mm-hmm.
And you just set into this pattern, and there it is. You just do it
Yeah.
every day. You're all three, and it's not working.
Right. Okay, back to neglectful though. Basic needs. So neglectful doesn't mean you're like letting your child starve in the street or something. Basic needs can be met, but there's little guidance, there's little connection. You're not like super involved in your child. And again, there's a balance here. You don't have to be the helicopter parent, like hovering all the time and involved with everything. That's also not healthy. Right. But there needs to be connection there.
So you're not doing things for them. Ideally, you're doing things with them.
Right.
And that's why our new parenting course is so critically important, because it's parent mentoring.
Mm-hmm.
And the mentoring your kids is the opposite of being neglectful.
Right.
So neglectful parenting is like, what? I pay the bills, they have a house, I tell them I love them. They're good. What's the problem here?
Let me live my life.
Because you're not involved.
Mm-hmm.
You're so caught up in your own life and your own stuff and things. Or you just walk in, it's like, kid, be good. I'll tell you what to do. But you're not coaching them. You're not mentoring them. You're not guiding them. And so it's negligence.
Right. And we've had parents even ask us, like, I get bored hanging out with my kids. Like, I don't want to hang out. I don't want to spend time with them. It's just not interesting. And that's a form of neglect because, one, it's not their fault. It's your fault if they're boring and you can't find anything to do with them. And two, you're their parent. So that's your job to mentor them and to be there and guide them.
Yep. If they're annoying or if for whatever reason you don't like your kids or you like being with them, that's on you, man.
Yes.
That is on you.
Right.
And so mentor your kids, get involved to help them become people you love spending time with.
Exactly. So with neglectful parenting, obviously kids end up feeling abandoned or lonely, or that they have to raise themselves because their parents are too busy.
Yep.
They often can have poor self-regulation, attachment issues, of course, and a low self-worth. Yep. So finally, to authoritative, which is the
you guys,
gold standard.
This was so many times. Rachel and I get to meet with adults every day. And with adults, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, we are still hearing about how they struggle because their parents were one of these three ineffective things. Mm-hmm. They're like, I had to do everything because my mom was never there. And, on and on. Like it drags through life with them. Mm-hmm. This stuff lasts decades. Right. It is not just a temporary small thing. This is not insignificant.
Right. And I think too few parents realize that because, one, now that they are parents, they're finally realizing the lasting impact their childhood has on them now. And so as a result, two, they're not being intentional enough about how they're raising their children to try to give them as much of an advantage as possible. Okay, authoritative. Authoritative is firm and kind.
Beautiful.
Which is possible. You can be firm and you can be kind. There's high control, meaning
there's order and
expectations,
structure.
There's order, there's standards, but there's also high warmth. There's lots of love, there's lots of fun, there's lots of playfulness, right? It's not cold, distant authoritarianism. So parents set clear expectations, like, they know exactly. And so we should talk about this because we mentioned, the difference is you have expectations or standards or boundaries, but not rules. Mm-hmm. Is there a specific example you want to give?
It's so subtle and
it
so
is very
important here because when you say it's authoritative, which is the good one, and that their expectations, the authoritarian starts thinking, well, that's what I do. Yeah. I have all of my expectations are very clear. I have rules for everything.
I expect you to do this and
but
do
it's
this
not working because on the surface it looks similar. The authoritarian and authoritative, it looks similar, but there are subtle differences that are very significant.
Well, the best way I think I can mentally picture this in my mind, because it is difficult to grasp in a lot of ways, but I see it as, and in fact, you drew it out the other day and I thought it was perfect because at first I was seeing, well, it's like a fortress with these four walls. But then you drew it out and it was like, here, it's kind of messy and all over the place, but the wall is still there. It's like, okay, this is allowed, but this isn't allowed. And that's here. And so it's a little bit more flexible and organic as family life often is. Family life is not just
Rigid, straight lines.
90-degree angles. That's not family life.
Right.
So in some ways, the boundaries are a little bit
Curvy.
quirky and curvy.
And it looks odd, and you're like, well, wait a minute, you don't allow that, but you do allow that. That doesn't make any sense. And you're like, well, it makes perfect sense when we walk through it and explain it, understand it.
Exactly.
Oh, well, yeah, no wonder.
Yeah.
And then, well, wait a minute, you got a hard line there, but then over here you have a gate, and the gate, you can open the gate. Yeah, of course you can, but it's a privilege gate.
Right.
And so if we live by the standard, then we get to open the gate and we get access to that thing. But otherwise, that gate stays closed.
Right.
So it's not a 100-foot wall that's never available. And we have these, scary, threatening, terrible things. That's very dictatorship.
And maybe the simplest example to give at this moment is going back to my table analogy. Like if you have a rule that you don't get on the table, that's hard and fast. It's black and white. And so, of course, when the child gets on the table, which every parent who has that rule knows their child is going to get on the table. Like you just know. Even if you don't, and then when it happens, you freak out as though,
I told you.
How could you dare get on the table?
That's our family rule.
That's when the real problems come. Like that's what causes the breaks in relationships in family life, because we have these hard and fast rules. And when our children act like children, we get upset that they behave that way.
So we create a battle, and now there's a rift between us. It's this drama, and it's painful, and there's this a real withdrawal in the relationship. It really hurt. And it was all caused because you set a dumb rule.
Well, right. A rule that, based on how the world really works, cannot be kept 100% of the time.
Right.
Because children are children.
And especially if your rules go against the nature of children.
Yes. I think that's important to emphasize.
So, if your dictator boss.
Well, let me just say real quick. If your rule requires that children behave like adults.
Yeah, your rule's dumb.
That is not healthy. And so that is part of this difference between rules and standards, is that in a standard, it's age appropriate.
Yep.
So you behave at your age level, but within certain appropriate boundaries, right?
Yep.
So then we go back to the table, and, I didn't have a rule about you don't get on the table, but I did have an expectation that we have good manners when we're eating, which includes not getting on the table.
And so when they would get on the table, which inevitably they do, because they're kids, authoritarian.
Inevitably could happen during dinner.
Right. The boss or the dictator or tyrant screams, yells, punishes. It makes an ugly scene.
Yes.
And it's like everybody feels like crap. The authoritative, which is the positive
who's holding the standard,
walks over and grabs him and says, hey, remember,
we don't get on the table during dinner.
We don't get up there. So come on down. And they do it again. Nope. Hey, come on. Come here. And if you do it again, you're not going to be allowed to sit near the table.
You'll have to sit over there and
there's a
eat your
natural consequence, right? I'm not going to be like, you're grounded or you're going to time out or so. No, it's like, it's authoritative, which is the good one, has very natural consequences. Instead of punishments, natural consequences. So if you keep getting on the table while we're eating, then I'm going to back your chair up.
So you can't reach the table.
So you can't reach the table. So you don't get to use the table. You have to sit right over here. You're still with us. You still get to eat. You're still part of the family.
Right.
There's a natural consequence. I just had to distance you from the thing you were doing.
Yes.
And I'm calm, I'm not upset. I'm correcting the behavior. I'm teaching. I'm mentoring. I'm guiding. and I slip them away. Instead of hard rule, I will scream and yell and spank your butt and make a big scene, and you're going to cry and everyone's going to feel like crap.
Right.
Because I just ruined the whole dinner.
Exactly.
Because we have a rule in our family that we all sit down together and have dinner together.
But the problem...
And then dinner sucks, and all of your kids hate sitting down to a meal with you because you're a dictator and a tyrant.
The problem is, and the irony is that in that scenario, many parents blame the child.
Absolutely.
They say the child is the one that ruined the dinner because they wouldn't obey me and kept getting on the table.
Exactly. Oh my goodness.
So parents are blaming children
for being children
while they're simultaneously not being the adult.
Yep.
And taking responsibility for the situation.
Oh, the irony.
Yes.
So being the adult in the family does not mean being the boss in the family.
Right.
It means being the leader.
Yeah. And it emphasizes, like you just explained in that scenario, that discipline is rooted in teaching, not in punishment.
Yes.
Especially because what else you would do in that scenario is you would talk to them again and remind them, hey, remember, look at your feet. Or look at your shoes. They're dirty. You were just outside today. You were running on the street. I don't want the dog poop and the dirt from outside on my table, especially while we are eating. And so you're teaching them why. Why is this a thing? So that they're like, oh, okay, yeah, you're right. I did step in dog poop. I don't want to get that on the table. I should not get on the table, right? The teaching is the key element there, because otherwise, going back to the whole idea of just blind obedience, they're not actually learning.
Yep.
They're just learning to keep rules out of fear.
Well, and they're not learning how to think, and they're not learning how to make good decisions on their own.
Right. Where
write this down, memorize it, internalize it. The absolute best form of discipline is teaching.
Yes. And many parents will say, well, I just don't have time for that. I need to get dinner done so I can go do this, or I do this thing, or take care of that. And so they think, well, this takes more effort. It takes more work. It takes more thinking. Instead of they get punished right away for breaking the rule and it's done, I have to do this multiple times and I have to say it multiple times. But what they don't realize is that the one process is, again, emphasizing fear, emphasizing obeying without questioning, which does not develop critical thinking skills or, ultimately it's not creating emotional intelligence and individual awareness, right? Because they're not taught to pay attention to their own bodies or their own thoughts or their own emotions. They're taught to just do what the authority figure tells them, which is unhealthy.
Simultaneously, they're not taught to pay attention to themselves or their surroundings or others. Yeah, situational awareness. When you put an arm around them and be like, here, take a look at that and notice that and see that. So with what you see right here, what would be the best behavior? And kids are sharp. They're like, oh, it'd be this and this. Like, exactly.
Yeah.
So now you notice it. Now you know what to do.
Exactly.
Instead of, I tell you what to do, you obey. And they're like, I don't even understand why. Because you didn't teach them how to have that awareness.
Exactly. And so when you use the authoritative style, you're teaching them autonomy. You're teaching them how to think through situations, and you're teaching them to be intelligent mentally, emotionally, socially, as opposed to just, well, I'm used to just doing what someone tells me to do, and otherwise I don't have a clue.
Right.
Which we've seen that with families.
I want to emphasize what you're saying there with time. If we teach and mentor our kids, it will take a lot of extra minutes.
Yes.
A lot that'll turn into hours. If we don't, guaranteed, there will be hundreds and thousands of hours you spend later in life trying to repair horrible things that have happened. And it goes into the hundreds of thousands of dollars and thousands of hours pleading, praying, desperately doing anything to try to get your kids to make good decisions when you could have prevented all of that with a few extra minutes here and there every day, teaching them how to think.
Right. And that's something that I just want to somehow drill into parents' heads so they understand that framework, because they're so willing Well, no, they're not willing to invest that time because it feels like an inconvenience. It feels like it's extra effort, but they don't realize that they're going to be paying for it either way. You're paying up front or you're paying on the back end with trying to fix things.
Yep.
It's way more worth it to pay up front with the extra effort, because as a result, you end up raising well-adjusted kids where they're confident, they're capable, they know how to think, they know how to make decisions. Like, that's the outcome that you get when you're willing to make those authoritative investments.
Beautiful. Okay, so the topic today was getting on the same page as
Back to
mom
that.
and dad. So listening to this podcast together is great. Discussing those
Discussing it.
4 philosophies or what do we call them? Not approaches.
We're calling it approaches or philosophies.
And I mean, I'd be hard pressed to, if you walk through those 4 and you understand them, that one of you be like, nope, I'm going to be the dictator, or I'm going to be permissive, or let's be neglectful together, spouse. You're like, no, duh. So you start there. And you're like, well, yeah, let's be authoritative. So let's make sure we have clear rules and standards and boundaries. Let's enforce them kindly. We can be firm and kind at the same time. That's the best way to do it. Everyone loves that. And so, well, let's do that. And so then you start going through specific things. You're like, well, in our family, like, we want people to be readers and we want to be healthy. So go through and, like,
I think it can also begin by starting with some of the rules you already have. And if, especially if one parent was like, well, you have this rule and I disagree, that's a great place to start for you to say, well, does this need to be a rule, or does it just need to be like, I'm teaching the standard or the philosophy behind it, like with the table example.
Exactly.
So that you both understand. And I think that that's a level of mental and emotional maturity that we have to gain as parents. We understand that there's nuance here. It's not black and white. It's not just you never do this thing or you get punished, right?
So
it's not that simple.
If we were doing this, and I want to kind of almost model it or role play it so that people know how to do this. So let's say you have a hard rule, and I don't get it. And so I'd be like, babe, you have this really hard rule for the kids, and you get after them if they're off. Like, tell me why. And so then you explain to me why it's so important to you. I'm like, okay, thank you. Thank you for explaining it. Like, I get that. I kind of see it differently. I don't think it's as important, but I totally understand why you see it that way. Let's talk about how we could teach it as a principle or a standard and have it, but not have it be one of those hard rules where we have to dictate.
Well,
that's what I would do right there.
Yeah. And I can actually, in my mind, think of an example because, and this is something I think a lot of moms can relate to. I personally would love to have a rule where everyone loads their dish in the dishwasher after every meal. But I have learned that I have to be very flexible on that because, one, it's not always feasible. The dishwasher is not always ready to be loaded. Two,
there's going to be things that are happening.
Well,
it's so unrealistic.
That's another thing too, that because of the nature of family life, we've always got, and the fact that we have this resort where we have lots of families and things going on, there's always something going on because of, number one, the dishwasher's not ready. If the dishwasher was ready every single day as soon as everyone was finished with their meal and all they had to do was put it in there, that would be one thing, right? But that's not the case because family life is not like that. It's more complicated. There's more that's happening. So what I have settled on instead is
let me interject. So then a mom would think, well, I need more rules. We have to have rules about somebody needs to unload the dishwasher before we eat any meal.
Yes.
And that means somebody needs, so now she's got 20 rules.
Which could be an approach, but that often ends up in more stress and more control and more forcing.
Yep.
So what I have landed on is all I care about is that 5 to 6 days out of the week, the dishes get washed, that the dishwasher gets run and unloaded, that the next phase of cleaning the dishes happens. And currently that happens best and easiest when our 14-year-old son does it.
And he gets to listen to his audiobook.
He
does the dishes.
He's essentially taken responsibility of this role. He enjoys doing it. It happens every single day. And so if people don't load their dish in the dishwasher and they just put it in the sink, I'm not sitting there stressing about it because I want this rule of you have to put your dish in the dishwasher, because that doesn't work for everybody.
Right.
But this does work. So I guess that's an idea of how here I have this standard of, yeah, I'm not going to let dishes pile up and sit there for weeks. That never happens, ever. That's the standard.
Or even days, like not going to happen.
Did I say weeks? I meant days.
Yeah.
That never happens. Dishes get washed every single day.
Yep.
But
because the standard is we want a clean
the
kitchen.
rule was what I'm saying, if I was strict and controlling, the rule would be no, everyone loads their dishes immediately after the meal. That just doesn't work.
It's not realistic. Plus,
It's not
I want to point
realistic.
something out.
Unless maybe you had like 2 kids, maybe.
So many parents sacrifice the better things for the small things. So they might set up that hard rule of like, when we're done, absolutely have to put the dishes away. And so that interrupts like this beautiful family bonding where everyone's sitting around enjoying each other, talking, having meaningful conversations.
Because we're like, we have to get to the next
connecting.
thing.
So the thing you most is this bonded, loving family.
Right.
But blasted, I've got to interrupt what I want most because I have this rule.
Yes.
And so we're sacrificing relationships for a dumb rule.
Which I think is very fascinating that you brought that up because we have launched to the first cohort, the Extraordinary Parent Mentoring Method course, and I've been going through all the intake forms and reading people and what they're struggling with and what they want to get, what they want to achieve in their family. And it's interesting to me because that was one of the things I thought of. So many of the moms who filled this out said, what I want more of is more joy, more peace, more laughter, more fun, that my kids remember me as being there and being involved. But what they're struggling with most is getting their kids to do chores and to do the things and to pick up. So it's almost like this incongruence. They want more being,
Yep.
but they're trying to focus on more doing to achieve the being. It doesn't work that way. Being requires you to be in the moment without an agenda, without a schedule, without a plan. That's what being is about. Doing is something different. Now, can we get our kids to be more helpful with the doing part? Yes, of course. But we have to allow ourselves to be in the being part without having all the stuff to get done.
And so we have this conflict.
Yeah, there is a
between
conflict.
all the rules we have in our heads. So every single one of us has a rule book in our heads that just got built over years. So it's this unconscious rule books of a rule book in your head of how you think things should be. And we're often letting the rule book disrupt the things we really want.
Right.
And so we have to learn how to get them to work together.
Yeah.
And so we can have both.
Because I am a mom and I understand how we think, it's almost like in our minds we think, well, I'm going to get everybody to do the chores and the rules first. And then after they've done that, then we can sit around and do this beautiful being and enjoying, not realizing that they actually, especially if that happens naturally, which it does, if they interrupt it, they're not going to get back to it because they have interrupted the flow. They've interrupted the beauty. They've interrupted the joy by trying to, it's like Mary and Martha in the Bible, They've interrupted that beauty of being in the presence of something amazing to try to get the things done, the checklist. It doesn't work that way.
Right.
It can't.
And so we have to make exceptions to our rules.
Right. Like the loading the dishwasher thing. I make an exception to that because I know, do you know what? We're all going to sit around here. We're going to enjoy. We're going to talk. We're going to be together. And later, my 14-year-old will wash all the dishes and it will get done.
And here's another approach. You stay in it and you have to settle your mind because your mind starts freaking out. I have a rule. The dishes need to get done. If they don't, I won't be able to go to bed tonight. And then I won't sleep. In the morning, I'll be on.
If you have, younger kids or they, they're not capable of helping out, you're thinking, I'm going to get stuck with all the work. I'm going to do, and we can do a whole podcast about that.
But if we stay in the moment, enjoy the beauty of it, the wonder, and then as it's settling down, you guys, that was so awesome. I love you all so much. Hey, there's look at the table, everybody. There's a bunch of dishes here. That would be a lot of work. And would everybody be willing, please, to take your dish over right now and give it a quick rinse and throw it in the dishwasher? That would just be amazing. Let's just do that all together. Like, yeah, boom, let's do it. And we all go over and take care of it, and it's quick and done. And there's no fighting, there's no dictatorship, there's no I'm the boss here, and I have to ruin a perfectly good moment.
And I know some people listening are probably like, well, that's not going to work. Like that approach, that's just not going to work. And there is this level where if it's sincere, meaning that, and this is difficult because there is a nuance here. I have to be willing ultimately because I'm the adult and I'm responsible to do all the work myself if I have to, because that's what responsible adults do. Right. And I know that this shift in me made a huge difference in the shift in my family. When I was willing to do the work instead of complain and whine and be the martyr, I just said, you know what? I want this done. And so if I have to, I will do it myself. That willingness also then made it more welcoming or open for people to want to contribute because they saw it now as like, I'm helping, I'm serving, I'm contributing to my mother who is actually willing to do it herself. Now, this is very different than like, I never ask for help. I never explain how
Yeah,
others
you're
can
the
contribute.
right. I
I
have to
know,
do
yeah,
everything
I have to do everything.
resentfully,
I'm going to
and
do
the passive
everything.
aggressive.
Yeah.
Well, I guess I'll
It's a
just
very
do it all
different,
myself.
yes, it's a very, very different attitude. But ultimately, it comes from an inner way of being that approaches it with, you know what? I am willing to do this because I do want that. Because that's another thing that's difficult for moms too. They don't understand that their family doesn't want the same things they want. They think my husband and my kids, they all want the dishes clean and the kitchen cleaned up, but they're just too lazy to do it. They don't they don't realize that their husband and kids don't care about it as much as they do
Yep.
because they're willing and ready to go off and do other things. And when they need to, they'll come back and clean up the kitchen. It doesn't have to be clean right now, right? It's simply a different way of thinking that most moms, I think, believe to be just some
Well,
sort
I
of
think
defect in their
no, same
character.
same with dads too, where dads might see kids doing something, and the dad thinks, well, the only reason they would do that is if they're lazy or
Right.
spoiled. And
Exactly.
so, if my way of thinking, if they don't value it as much as I do, then there's only one option.
Right.
They're lazy and spoiled and entitled, and so
Exactly.
I need to go be the boss, the dictator, and
Mhm.
tell them that they're lazy and
Yeah.
spoiled and entitled. I need to scream at them so that they're not doing that anymore.
Right.
And we all know that doesn't work. And the dad lecture is lame. It doesn't work. And so it's part of getting on the same page is realizing that our spouse and our children think differently than
You're
we
right.
do.
Their brains literally operate differently.
So
They
you
see different things. They notice different things.
Yep, and so you can't come to this erroneous conclusion that they think like you, and so if they're not doing what you think they should be doing, then they must be XYZ.
Right.
That's not true.
Exactly.
And so we have to put this on the table. We have to discuss these things, go through the core philosophy, go through specific
Right.
instances.
Like screen times, like, dishes, like chores, go through.
Well, even yelling, like I know
Yeah.
some couples that one of the parents yells and screams, and the other one hates it so
Hmm.
bad. So talk through that. Be like, hey, what can I do to help you so you're not yelling at the kids? Because yelling at the kids, like, it's not helping, and they know that, and they feel bad about it.
Hmm.
And so you're like, well, what can we do? How can we do it differently? And way often they're yelling because they don't know what else to do. They just
Right.
want the kids to respond and they aren't. So they yell. So, like, okay, let's strategize. Let's come up with better strategies and tactics, which is why Rachel and I created our whole course tools and tactics that actually work. Like, let's get the tools that work so we don't have to use screaming and yelling and insulting and name calling and threatening
Hmm.
as our only and last resort.
Right. Exactly. And then, most importantly, the primary focus of this is to be more united,
Yeah.
to have more clarity. And that includes talking through it about why we want the things that we want so that we can respect each other, we can back each other up, we can support our differences, but from a place of unity rather than
Yes.
confusion,
So
right?
implementation. Rachel and I would talk about what's the ultimate thing we want? Okay, we want our kids to do this. What does that look like on a day to day? Well, it looks like this. Okay, good. We agree on that. So how are we going to do implementation? How are we going to enforce this? And that's where we might be different because we're going to be different people, and that's okay. But we're right. We're unified. We both want the same thing. We want this standard for our kids. We're going to teach them. You teach like a mom. I'm going to teach like a dad. We're going to support each other, and we're going to move forward towards that thing. Now we're on the same page.
Yeah.
Or at least in the same book, and we can help each other, and then it feels fantastic.
Right. But we have to, and I know that we say this a lot, but we have to emphasize this again and again and again, because as I have a reminder on my phone that goes off every day, nothing gets better until I do. Ultimately, this is a journey of individual personal development.
Yep.
We have to get better as people, because even as you were talking through some of these scenarios of yelling and defensiveness and rules, ultimately that's all an inner journey. That's all an inner problem.
Yep.
Right? You know, there's uncomfortable truths in this parenting journey, and one of them is, unfortunately, that you are the problem.
Yep.
You're the problem. It's not your kids, it's not your spouse. You are the one that needs to change. Now, obviously, nobody's perfect, and they also need to change as well. But when we focus on changing ourselves first, that's where the magic is.
That's when we create real change.
Right. That's when the change actually occurs.
In a very real way. It's not that our children are acting like children. It's that parents are acting like children.
It's true.
And say, hey, it's time for you to grow up
And
and
be
to
the
be
adult.
the adult in the room and in the family, and to own it, to take full responsibility for the outcomes, to take total ownership of your children's behaviors.
Because they're your fault.
Acknowledging like, well, I just haven't taught them well enough.
Or
Immediately you're
modeled it
like,
well enough.
I've told them 10,000 times, they know. Like, well, to know and not to do is really not to know.
Exactly. If they're not doing, they don't know.
So they don't know, which means you told them, but you didn't teach them.
Right. And you probably didn't model it.
Exactly. And so they're more often than not, what kids are doing is modeling something you've done. They picked it up.
They're imitating it.
Imitate it. So it's imitation without regulation.
They're exaggerating it.
Yep. So they notice something you do, and now they're going to take their little variant on it and apply it with their siblings or apply it to their temper tantrums, because they'll often throw a tantrum because they've been watching you throw adult tantrums. And they're like, oh, I know how to behave when I get upset, when I don't get my way, when I don't like what someone's done. I saw my mommy do that. Or I saw dad. Dad does it every day when he comes home. I know exactly what to do when I'm upset. Right. And they do their own little variation of it. And when you realize that as a parent, you're like, oh, if I want to create change, I change myself because I'm the problem.
Exactly.
And so that means you're the solution. That's good news.
Yeah, right. That is the good news. You are the solution. In many ways, it's honestly never been easier to become a great parent because there's more resources out there than there's ever been in the history of the world. I mean, it used to be you only just, in some ways, it was a positive. You had your extended family to rely on, your grandma, your mother, to give you advice and guidance because they'd walked the path, they'd done the journey. And
or they're passing along.
Well, I mean, that's
generational
disadvantage as well. But I'm saying in some ways it was an advantage because you weren't just trying to figure it out on your own,
right,
like so many nuclear families are today.
Right.
But the benefit we do have of today's world is that we have access to so many resources. One, of course, is our course that we just created, which I would highly
parent mentoring method.
Yeah, I would highly encourage you to click the link in the show notes.
Of course.
The enrollment opens and closes, so I would get on the waiting list so that when it does open again, because we're doing it in cohorts according to age, the age of your children, so that we can really focus on those ages. Anyways, get on the waiting list so when it opens up again, you can get into one of the cohorts. But there are resources out there to help you.
One little caveat to that is that there's a lot of really crappy resources out there too. There's a lot of garbage from,
which is why
these parents who had one or two kids and sent them off, like they outsourced them the whole time, and then they're like, I'm going to book about parenting. And you're like, well, you didn't even raise your kids.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, but they're very obedient. Like, well, I don't want obedient kids.
Yeah, that's true. There is actually a lot of advice out there that is in many ways harmful to
Yeah.
children, which is one of the reasons we've created our course,
Yeah.
because there are better ways to do things. And, that's what we're sharing. And of course, we do have our free guides, the free 6-step guide on how we raise 7 well adjusted kids while traveling to 60 plus countries. And we have the checklist, which is everything, what we do every day to raise our 7 well adjusted
So
kids.
what I did, somebody asked, like, I want specific steps. And I sat down, I thought, what are the things we've been doing now for years?
Mm.
Like, what are our non-negotiables? Like, we do this stuff religiously. And I made that list.
Yeah.
So this is a checklist of what we've been doing for 22 years with phenomenal results, not just in our own family and with all of our different kids and all their struggles,
Mm-hmm.
but these things we've shared with our clients and that they've implemented with their families to get amazing results,
Right.
total transformations in their families.
Eh,
And that list is absolutely gold and it's absolutely free.
Right. And I think it's so important for people to understand, those who don't know, we don't just have lucky kids. We weren't just born, we didn't just get the kid lottery, right? Because we've got ADHD, we've got learning disabilities, we have adopted and birthed kids. So we've got a whole mix in there. And so these are things that work because they work, not because we're just lucky.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's the equation. It
Right.
just works.
It's a math problem.
Like you follow the formula and it works.
Even if you have to include the X factors for your
Right.
children
Well,
and
there's
their
all kinds of
differences.
every kid has a factor.
Right.
You're like, well,
But that's okay.
what worked for that kid? No, I got to change it up for this kid. And
That's
that's
part of
the
the
critical piece.
math equation.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I love it. Okay, so have a conversation this week if you can, as soon as you can, and multiple
Be willing
conversations.
to lean into the discomfort,
Yep.
be willing to bring it up, even if you're afraid, even if they won't handle it well, whatever. Like, be willing to move into that space, because the obstacle is the way. On the other side of that conversation is
The solution.
getting you closer to the solution you
Yeah.
want.
And approach it tactfully. Don't be like, we need to talk
You're
about
a
your
horrible father.
problem. You're terrible. Just say, hey, let's talk about our differences in
How to make
strategy
it
here.
better.
Let's set them on the table and let's just examine them and see if we can come up with a way that we
Mm-hmm.
both agree on that works for both of us, that we complement each other instead of compete against each other.
Yes.
Okay. Love you guys. Reach upward.